Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a narrative from the very core of Islamic texts. It's a story that many have never heard, and it challenges one of the most widely held beliefs about the faith.
I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. What if your eternal fate, we're talking paradise or hellfire, was already sealed at the moment of creation based on something you had absolutely no control over? This isn't just some wild hypothetical. It's a concept we find deep within Islamic tradition.
You know, the message we almost always hear, the one that's promoted from the pulpit and in interfaith dialogues, is that Islam is a religion of complete and total racial equality. That in the eyes of God, skin color is totally irrelevant. And that's pretty much the public-facing, modern understanding of the faith.
But what happens when we go back and actually look at the foundational texts for ourselves? You know, the Quran and the hadith. Well, that's where we find a story that's, well, it's often left out of the conversation. And it's a narrative that tells a completely different story about race and destiny. To really get our heads around this, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, back to the story of Adam and the creation of all of his descendants, because this is where this idea of a kind of racial predestination first shows up.
Okay, so check this out. This comes from a specific hadith in a collection called Mishkat al-Masabi. It says that God struck Adam's right shoulder, and out came his white children, who are described as being like pearls. Then he strikes Adam's left shoulder, and out come his black children, described as being like coals.
And then comes the divine declaration. The text says, God looks at the white children and says, they are for paradise. Then he looks at the black children and declares, they are for hell. And here's the crucial part. In both cases, the declaration ends with the exact same Arabic phrase, la abali.
So what in the world does la abali mean here? Well, it's often translated as I fear not. But a better translation, theologically speaking, would be I care not or it doesn't matter to me. It signals an absolute, irreversible finality. The decision is made. Destiny is sealed. It means that whatever those individuals do in their lives later on, it's irrelevant. Their fate was set right then and there.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's one story. Maybe it's an outlier. But here's the thing. It's not. This story about Adam doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's actually part of a much wider pattern of color symbolism that you find all throughout the foundational texts of Islam.
Let's go straight to the Quran itself. In Surah Ali Imran, it speaks directly about the Day of Judgment. And it says, right there in the text, that on that day some faces will be made white, tabyaddu wujuh, and other faces will be made black, taswaddu wujuh.
And the verse doesn't leave it up to interpretation. It explicitly connects these blackened faces with damnation. They are literally told to taste the torment because of their disbelief. I mean, there's no ambiguity there. The scripture itself is making a direct visual link between blackness and punishment.
And this theme, this pattern of color symbolism, it doesn't just stop at the Quran. It extends right into the recorded words and even the visions of the Prophet Muhammad himself.
I mean, just listen to some of these examples from the Hadith. Satan is described as looking like a particular black man. In one of the Prophet's dreams, a plague is symbolized by a black woman with unkempt hair. Even when describing a worst-case scenario for a leader, the example given is an Ethiopian slave whose head looks like a raisin. The consistency of this negative association is pretty hard to deny.
So when you start putting all these different pieces together, you have the creation story with the pearls and the coals, you have the whitened and blackened faces on Judgment Day, and you have all these consistently negative associations in the Hadith, a very clear and honestly a very disturbing picture starts to emerge.
And this brings us to a real, unavoidable conflict. On one side, you have the modern message of absolute racial equality that we hear all the time. But on the other side, you have these foundational texts, and they seem to be telling a completely different and deeply troubling story.
So we're left with this final, really challenging question. How can a faith champion racial equality when its own creation story seems to hardwire racial predestination right into the very fabric of humanity? It's a profound contradiction, and it's something that demands some serious thought from anyone trying to understand the complexities of this tradition.